In today's video, we're gonna make a fun motion capture animation using Cinema 4D and the hair module. Let's go. Hey, it's Nick here from Greyscalegorilla, helping you make better renders in less time. Now, before we get started today, I wanted to remind you to please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And also, if you haven't seen it yet, we have an Intro to Cinema 4D series. It's a completely free training series on our website. We're gonna link it up here and also down in the description. Okay, let's go straight into today's tutorial. It's all about how to add hair and add dynamic hair to an animated character. Now, you're gonna wanna make sure you followed along on our first video. The first video is all about adding the character data in Cinema 4D and then prepping it and getting it ready for this tutorial. So if you haven't seen that video, I'm gonna link it in the description. Make sure you watch part 1 and then follow along on today's tutorial. We're gonna add all the hair and all the fun effects. All right, let's head on into Cinema 4D and let's get started. Now we're here and we're gonna get into that hair look, and it's as easy as this. For this animation, what I'm gonna do is basically put hair on all parts of this character. And the way I'm gonna do that is just select our surface here, alpha surface, and I'm gonna go hit Shift C. Shift C is basically a way to search. There's so many things and so many menus inside of Cinema 4D that I use Shift C a lot. And I'm just gonna type hair, and right there, add hair. I'm gonna click that. You could also hit enter at that point and it'll just add it. And because I had my alpha surface selected, our hair is gonna jump on it. Now, you may be using other models, may be using the joint chain trick, and if you do that, just select that geometry and add hair that way. Okay, once we have hair, we need to dial it down just a little bit. That's pretty crazy amount of hair. So in our hair settings, first thing I'm gonna do is go to length and just kind of dial it down. I want it puffy. I want some puffy hair, but not that much. Okay, that looks a little bit better to me. We may adjust it down the road. Let's go with 15, something right around there. Looks pretty good. And let's just hit play and see what happens. You're gonna see the hair's gonna fling and bounce all around. Now, this is fine, and you could do this, but what I want it to stay fuzzy, right? I want it to kind of stay sticking out like a fur ball and less floppy. So to do that, in our hair settings, we're gonna go to dynamics, and we're gonna go down here to, let's see, hold roots is pretty high. I wanna say rest mix, if I turn that up, and rest hold. Let's just turn both of those to 50% and see what that looks like. This is already better. That's actually a little too stiff. There's no bouncing around. It's just like super, I want it a little bit bouncy. So let's go to 20 and 20. Go back to frame 0, see what that looks like. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. So I want you to play around with some of these settings. That might still be a little bit fuzzy, but let's click render and see what we got. Okay, we got some work to do for sure on the texture and all the lighting and all that stuff, but let's get some basics going here. I'm gonna turn this up just a little, just so we're more fuzzball, and kind of play our animation here, make sure we're looking good before we move on. Okay, that's pretty good. So when we click render, you're gonna see a few things. First of all, we need to add some more hairs to the simulation, okay? Second of all, we need to work on this texture so that it's not just this brown default hair, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. First thing we're gonna do is add more hairs. If you go to your hair module here, you can go to hairs, and under hairs, you're gonna see count by default is 5,000. This directly shows how many hairs you get. You click 200 hairs, you don't get a lot of hairs. 5,000 wasn't enough. Let's go to 20,000. Now you can do a lot here. Look at that, already looking better. Now there's something that is kind of, there's a couple things making those look pretty ugly. One is the default light on the camera is shining straight into our hairs here. There's no shadows. The hairs are all perfectly straight. You could see the gray behind it, and we're gonna fix all that stuff right now. So first thing we're gonna do is just add a really simple light. So let's grab our light. Let's move it up and kind of out front and to the right, okay? That's just a default place I start with lights, up and to the right, camera right. And now when we hit render, you're gonna see our light is coming from up top. However, there's still no shadows. Okay, so we're going to go to shadows. We're going to go to soft shadows, click render. Now we're going to get somewhere. Now we're going to start to get some shadows going on. Now, we're still going to see through to this character down below. So one of the tricks you could do is just kind of color it something, and maybe we'll do that after we pick our hair color. So I'm actually going to jump around just a little bit. I always do. Jump from, texturing to lighting to all this stuff. That's just kind of how I work. And what we're going to do now is make our hair a lot more colorful, a lot more fun than just this brown. So first thing is, I just double clicked on our hair material, which was automatically made when I added hair. And now we can go to color, and you could just literally pick a brighter color. You could also make it a gradient. So in this case, it is blue at the root of the hair, pink at the end of the hair. Let's click render now. Already looking way more fun. And we also are getting some nice specular hits. I'm going to leave the specular as it is. You can play around with this to get some shinier hair or more dull. I think the defaults are okay on this one. We have a ton of other tutorials on, going into hair and stuff on the website. But also thickness, it's not bad. I might shrink it just a little bit. 0.5 thickness, and the tip will stay at 0.1. And that'll just make our hairs a little bit thinner. But they're still sticking like straight out. And it looks very computer generated, frankly. It looks very stiff. Even if we let it play for a while, you're going to see it's going to fuzz out a little bit, but every hair is just this perfect little strand. And this is where these other settings come in. So we have, what we really want is variation of our hairs. And so first variation I'm going to add is length. So if I'm going to turn on length variation, and what it gives me is, okay, how long do you want the hair? First of all, I could just double the length. Oh, I can't double it here. Interesting. I thought I could. You're going to have to make it longer in here. But the variation is what we're trying to control. So you can go to 50%. And now there's going to be a 50% variation based on some of the longer hairs and shorter hairs. Already, this is giving it a little bit more variation, a little bit more, humanity into our simulation. That's really what we're trying to make this look like a real, like, fuzzy rug that's on this person and not a computer sim. Okay, next thing is scale. We could play with that. Let's try frizz instead. Frizz actually frizzes out our hairs. So now when we hit render, you're going to see it starts to really kind of clump up and make little messes of our hairs. They're not straight anymore. They're actually frizzing out. And I'm actually going to turn it down a little bit, because these things really add up. Because we're going to add a little bit of kink as well. We could turn that down. And I encourage you to experiment with some of these. Clump, tighten density, all these things add a little bit of variation. In fact, clump's really fun. It just kind of makes little clumps like there's stuff in the carpet. You know what I'm saying? That looks way better. Love it. Okay, so I encourage you to experiment with that to make it your own. Maybe you want shorter hair, longer hair, all that stuff. Maybe you want to watch another hair tutorial and see how you can get different colors based on the height of the character. There's a ton, obviously, you could do, but with these tutorials, I want to give you just some ideas, some options, some things to play with. So again, experiment, have fun, play around. Let's tackle this character color here. Now, we're seeing through this pink's fur here down to the character, and that to me is not very good looking. So I'm actually going to click both of our textures, and you could just replace textures if you have a character that's really textured out with hats and gloves and whatever. You can actually just delete those textures and add a new texture to it. In this case, I'm just going to use their default textures here, but I'm going to go into the luminance channel. And I'm just going to add in a little bit of like a blue, like super dark. I don't want it to be glowing through the fur. I just want that if you see through the hair at all, I want there to be something there that is not just gray. So I'm going to turn off reflectance. I'm going to turn on luminance. And again, just kind of pick this dark blue color. And because the roots are blue, now when we see through to the character, it's not as visible. In fact, the reason I picked blue is mostly for it to just get out of the way, right? I want it to look like a big clump of fur. So now it looks like a big clump of fur. And you can experiment with different colors. Just make sure it's not too bright and glowy. Okay. Now, let's tweak our design just a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit more fur because I think it's more fun that way. And now let's add our floor. Let's add our reflective floor. And then I want to talk a little bit about hair dynamics to make sure that the hairs don't go through the floor. Okay, so let's, first of all, the way I got the reflective floor is with HDRI Studio. Now, we're not going to use HDRI Studio for the HDR. In fact, we could just turn this all the way down. But we are going to use it for the floor because it's going to give us some nice reflective floor settings and allow us to kind of change the background colors really easily. So in this case, I'm just going to go to the seamless floor controls. I'm going to make a really dark gray background. I mean, really dark. It's going to look almost black. I'm just going to add a little bit of variation in there just to get a little bit brighter in the center. That looks great. You can see we're starting to get some shadows here from our light. But with the reflective floor, all we have to do is just turn up our reflection. We can even turn up the blur a little bit. And now our character is going to reflect in that floor and give us that nice look. Okay, here's the problem though. We don't want this hair to go through the floor. That's going to break the realism of this animation. If we see hair start to go through the floor, we're going to go, that's not real. That's not real. So how do we do that? We need to add a plane, and all this plane is just some geometry for our hairs to interact with, okay? And if you want more floppy hair, by the way, let me just address this. If you want more floppy hair and you don't want the hair to go through the character as it flops down, you're going to actually use the same technique. So if you're wondering that, that's how you do it. So I'm just going to set our plane down. I'm actually going to hide it from our camera. And for that, I'm going to hold down Option or Alt on your keyboard. And I'm going to click these little traffic lights, they call them, to green and then to red. Red means it doesn't show up in a render and it doesn't show up in the viewport, but it's still there. Now, what we need to do now is tell our dynamic system to look out for this floor and to not let any hairs intersect with it. So if we go to tags, we can go to hair tags, we can go to hair collider, and that's what we want. We want this hair, when it hits the floor, to collide with it. And that just means, well, let's just wait till his hand hits the ground here. Here we go, and put that hand down. Bam! So if everything goes well now, it should kind of spread out the hair around. And that's what we get. Check it out. None of the hairs are going through the floor. They're going to kind of mash out to the side. And that's going to help our realism quite a lot. Okay, so we're already looking pretty good here. I would encourage you to play around with colors and experiment with different things. I wanted to also show you how I got that rainbow color fur. And all I did was I went to our hairs and I went to our color here and I twirled down this arrow. Now, most versions of Cinema 4D, when you hit load preset, are going to come with all these really cool presets. And all I used was this one right here, full colors. I've been using this one a lot. You know, it's just a lot of black and white stuff and a lot of kind of, you know, really sinister looking renders sometimes. I like to add a bunch of colors just to see what it looks like. So let's go ahead and add that. That looks pretty cool to me. We can also adjust the colors of our character, the actual geometry of the character, and just kind of turn that down more black. And that'll just kind of get out of the way of our hair there. Okay, so this is cool. We have a nice little shadow going on here. We have our reflection going on. But in these cases right here, I wanted to show you that sometimes things can get a little bit dark when it comes to hair shadows, the way that it falls off and the way that all this stuff works. There's two things that you could do. Now, the first one is something I use all the time, and that's a fill light. Now, we have it in Lightkit Pro here. We call it the global light. And what you could do is add just a little bit of lighting into your scene to kind of fill in those really dark shadows. In this case, we have a default light that is all set to go, global light. It's even got a little blue in there to help it look a little bit more natural. You can see now we're filling in some of that light detail in that leg that used to be 100% black. Now, it's one of the most important things when you're trying to make something look realistic in 3D is that your shadows are not too contrasty. In some cases, you need really dark shadows, but in most cases, if you go kind of photograph something or shoot video or whatever, almost nothing turns 100% black. So adding just a little bit of fill light like this really helps out in the scene. Okay, and the second thing that I want you to experiment with is using some tags on this light to adjust how it looks with hair. And this is something with hair I didn't know until recently, but I wanted to share it with you guys because I use it all the time. So now in tags, make sure your light is selected. Go to tags, go to hair tags, and go to light. Okay, so now we have soft shadows on our light. That's what we want. We also have the density of the shadows. We could turn that down. But here's the one that I'm going to adjust, the shadow map. Now, by default, it's 250, which is fine. That'll make a really nice soft shadow. But as we turn this up, it's going to make the shadow a little bit more sharp. Okay, and this means our shadow on the floor is more accurate. It also means that the shadows in between each one of the hairs is more accurate. Now, this will take a little bit longer to render as you turn this up, but every time you go up, it's going to make the definition between each one of our hairs a lot more realistic. And so just experiment with that. It's another tool I wanted to show you guys, and this is already looking really fun. Maybe a little bit more on our global light, just so it's nothing's falling off too dark. And remember, we could always add a little bit of contrast later, but if we render it at full black, there's nothing we could do. So right now, that looks pretty nice to me. I really like that look. Let's just play a couple frames here, make sure we're all set to go. And boom, we're looking nice. Okay, so that is the final look there. Just for your render settings, I wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page here. When you go to output, you can do an HD render. I'm going to go 1920 by 1080. And you want to make sure your hair renderer is turned on. Usually the defaults are okay. And also, I use the physical render almost all the time. But with hair, I wanted to point out that hair is one of those times where I try to use the standard renderer. It gives me a little bit more accurate results. Sometimes I end up going physical, and it's definitely something you could experiment with. But I did want to point out that I am using the standard renderer on this one. Make sure you pick where you want to save. And the last thing you want to do is go to your frame range and say all frames. And when you go to render, you should be all set. Now, we didn't talk about the camera. So let me just add that really quickly to the end here, because I want to make sure we always talk about all the pieces it takes to really get a render going. And in this case, I'm going to set up our camera, pick a longer lens, something like a 60, 70 millimeter, and just kind of center it. And then I just want to test, move on down the road and just kind of test where all this stuff is and see where our render's going. Now, I just made a mistake, and anytime we make a mistake here at Greyscalegorilla, we try to explain what we did so that hopefully you won't make the same one. So we're going to take a chance to do that right now. I took some dynamics, specifically some hair dynamics and some hairs bouncing around, and I skipped ahead in the timeline here way far forward while it was playing. So what Cinema's trying to do now is calculate all those dynamics to go from here all the way to frame 170. Now, eventually, this should time out. This should work just fine. But it's something I wanted to, as we make mistakes here, let you know, maybe not do that, right? So as I learn, you learn. And I encourage you guys to do that too. Don't hide your mistakes. If you're playing around, you break something, don't edit it out. Show people, what you did wrong and move on. Look, we're already done. I got to show you a little fun thing there, and there we go. Okay, so now we're just checking, different parts of our scene here before we hit the render button. That looks good. Maybe the global light is a little bit too high. Maybe I do want those shadows to fall off a little bit darker toward the bottom. There it is. See the difference there? See, now that's some nice shadows going on. So, check out some different parts of your frame here. And when you're all set to go, hit render, and you are all set. All right, thanks again for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that one. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do. And also, if you haven't seen our Intro to Cinema 4D series, head on over to our site or click it here, check the description below. And by the way, we have a ton of other videos all about motion capture and creating some really fun effects. So make sure you find that playlist. I'm gonna link that up as well. Also check the description. We'll hopefully see you in some more videos all about motion capture. All right, that's it for today, and I will see you in another video really soon. Bye, everybody. Motion capture. Motion capture. Motion capture. Motion capture. 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 You know, if you say any word enough times, it starts to sound really weird. Capture. 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 What's up, Capture? How you doing, Capture? It's my next dog's name.